Dit is vir my 'n ongelooflike groot voorreg om met Vusi Thembekwayo te gesels. Nou, weer eens, as dit kom by besigheid, 'n besigheidsbrein en waagmoed en entrepreneurskap en ontwrigting, kom sy naam eintlik eerste op. Vusi, thank you for your time and it's such an honor to have you on GROOTplaas.
I'm humbled.
I am humbled. I want to start with you have a wealth of experience in business as a venture capitalist, investor, entrepreneur, and our viewers will also remember you from Dragon's Den, Africa. So from your perspective, and it's quite an important perspective, where do the opportunities lie for investment and growth in the agricultural sector?
Thank you so much. First, let me just say I'm incredibly bullish on the agricultural sector. I think not only in South Africa, but also across the continent and globally. And the reason for this is because the boom in global economic stature, the boom in population numbers across the world necessitates that there is a broader need for agricultural production across the world.
Yes.
The question you're asking is, where are the real opportunities? I think that the opportunities are at the intersection of technology and traditional agriculture. I think that space where traditional agriculture leverages and uses technology to make itself more productive, to increase throughput, to supply new markets and to access new spaces. I think that space is one for me that's very, very exciting.
Now, obviously, from your experience as an investor in Lion Cage, and that's an emerging technology accelerator, how does technology specifically play a role in the intersection of investment, business, and agriculture?
So the way I always explain it is like this, right? So say technology is an efficiency mechanism. In other words, the role of technology is to take an industry that operates with a particular set of constraints around supply and demand and make either the supply more efficient or the demand allocation and demand aggregation more efficient. And as a consequence of this, it creates tremendous value for operators in that ecosystem. So you might imagine, for instance, we were actually looking fairly recently at a phenomenal agricultural startup. Great guy. It's his third startup in the agricultural space, and the first two he built and exited. Yeah. Very successful entrepreneur. And his business is about leveraging and using technology to allocate the available production of grain proceeds and certain types of production for market making, right? So whereas in the past you would have to go to a coöperatie or any one of these, he's done it in such a way that you can actually do this on the platform. So you can do price discovery, market discovery online on the platform, and you can match a buyer and a seller. And he's built a rail system around that. And so if you think about what that business means, then it means that there is an efficiency mechanism that has been built into not only price discovery but also market allocation. Yeah. So who gets what product at which end, in what quantity, and for what purpose. All of those things are now built into that. So the role of technology, I always say this to people, the role of technology is to replace inefficiencies. It's not to replace people.
Yes.
People misunderstand it, right? People think technology is going to replace you. It's not really going to replace you. It's going to replace the inefficiencies in what you do.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity for us as farmers, as farm workers, as laborers, as unions, as banks, the opportunity for all of us in the ecosystem is to think about how do we leverage technology to make the ecosystem more efficient.
Yeah. Do you think, what would you say to somebody who is in farming, who's a farmer, and strictly believe that they can still go on doing what they've done for the past few years, not embracing technology? Do you think that is a good future for them lying ahead?
No.
That's a clear answer. Yes.
No. And the reason for that is actually quite simple. Technology is a bit like it's a bit like a tsunami wave coming onto the shores of an island nation. It doesn't ask for the permission of the inhabitants of that island nation. The tsunami wave just comes.
Yes.
Technology is the same way. So to maybe say it differently, technology is agnostic of beliefs. It doesn't care what you believe.
It happens.
It only cares.
Yes.
It happens. It only cares about creating the market efficiencies that the market needs.
Yeah.
Right. And the world today is so flat. I always say this to people: the world today is so flat. There is a war between Russia and Ukraine, and all of a sudden, you know, base production, base fuels, and all sorts of inputs that the agricultural sector needs across the emerging markets, but even in South Africa and other frontier markets, they see a marked increase in pricing because there is an effect coming from Europe.
Yes.
So if we operate in a global ecosystem, that means you need to understand that you're only as safe in your business as you are globally relevant.
Yes, that's true. That is absolutely true. And, you know, going globally, but you specifically, you are also incredibly passionate about Africa, the Africa continent. And
yes.
I'm quite curious to know, what have you seen in terms of technology in agriculture across Africa, but specifically something that excites you?
That's a great question. So I've seen several kind of plays, which for me are very interesting. At the moment, we're seeing a lot happening in the technology downstream, not so much upstream. And I suppose the reason for that is because the upstream, and I'll explain what those means in a minute, but the upstream, a lot of the technology that's disrupting the upstream part of the value chain happens to be heavily industrialized and driven by large corporates, right? So you'll find a lot of large multinationals walking into the largest companies operating in the agricultural sector and implementing for them a technology solution that's going to help them become more efficient. And so we don't hear about that because it's not as sexy, right?
Yes,
but it is there, and it does happen.
It's true.
In my world, though, where we deal a lot more with like sexy frontier technology, what we're seeing there is something quite interesting. What we're seeing there is we're seeing a number of technologies that are aimed at the owner operator. In other words, these are the people who own and operate actual production, the farmers, and making them more efficient on price discovery, more efficient on demand projection.
Yes.
You know, we often talk about price discovery, but very few people talk about demand projection, right? Because if you either over project or under project demand, there is a huge amount of margin that you can miss in that opportunity.
Yes.
But we're also seeing a lot of technology play into the forecasting of weather patterns and what that means for your ability to produce certain types of crops or to produce certain types of product within your agricultural space. All of these are different iterations of like different technologies. They rely on different inputs, but what I'm noticing as a trend is that the trend is more focused on the end user of the actual product. It's the farmer. And then, of course, you're seeing an awful lot happen, and it's probably the most advanced area of technology in the agricultural space today. But you're seeing an awful lot happen in the world of the biology and the biochemicals that's required to operate in the space. You're seeing an awful lot happen in seed production and the protection of seeds and a whole host of that stuff is very exciting. And I often see, like, when we get a lot of the decks that come across our table, I always say to my team, I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm like a grade 3 again, because the language is like a different level and there's so much you have to learn about the stuff that's happening there. But it's fascinating to learn about people, how people are building strands, for instance, that are making crops more resilient, that are making, a whole host of other stuff that's creating reliability into the agricultural ecosystem. I have to say that I think the technology is going to disrupt a whole host of sectors, but for me in agriculture specifically, it's going to have the most pronounced alpha in terms of its ability to generate results for operators in that space who are able to embrace it.
And I think what it also is the possibility and the potential that still lies ahead. And that's something about technology that also excites me even, because you can't really, a lot of the innovative stuff that's still coming, you can't see it or predict it now, and when that wave comes, the potential that it opens up for a continent like Africa, it's surreal. And you would agree that's also something really exciting, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you just think about drone technology and how drone technology has been used in the agricultural sector just over the past decade, right? A decade ago, drone was like a proper frontier technology. Not a lot of people were talking about it. Not people were aware of it. Today, if you're a mid-sized or large agricultural producer, you have to have a strategy on drone. You have to have something that you're doing with drone, just because it's added so many efficiencies.
Yes.
And that's one, but I think there's so many others that you're going to see. I think watch out for what's going to be happening with artificial intelligence and the role that intelligence is going to be playing into predictive analytics, demand forecasting, weather pattern forecasting, and a whole host of stuff. Very exciting things to come. And if you're the operator and you're watching this and you're like, geez, man, I'm just worried about, can I make my tonnage at the end of the month?
Yes.
The great thing is that in a market like the agricultural sector, specifically in South Africa, the industry is sufficiently tight-knit that you will discover what's best technology to use fairly quickly, because somebody in your space will be using it.
That's so true. Use what's comfortable to you and what's true to your farming. A fact also is we need to grow the sector inclusively, but access to technology is a barrier to entry for emerging farmers specifically. If you were starting out with little to no capital, how would you overcome this hurdle?
It's such a tough question. It's a good question, but it's a tough question.
Yeah.
I think there are a few things to say there, right? So first, the thing about technology is you focus on the thud, not the FUD, as we call it in venture capital. The FUD is, there's certain, it's an overused expression in media, but there's certain newspapers, certain publications, when they run a story, it lands on the table with a thud. It's like an authority.
Yes.
And the FUD is like, everybody's following the next fad and the next thing. So what I would say is, if you're an emerging farmer, an emerging person emerging operator in the agricultural sector, is look for impactful technologies.
Yes.
In other words, don't try every single frontier technology. Just try the stuff you need that's going to make a difference today. That's the most important. That's the first. The second is deep is always better than wide. Right? So rather than have a tech stack of 10 different technologies that are plugged in and you're trying to figure out how all of these things work, rather get really good and competent at 2 different technologies that operate in a fundamental part of your production value chain, and go deep into those so that you can really reap the efficiencies and the rewards in the efficiencies that you get from those.
Yes.
And then the third thing I would say is have a roadmap for technology implementation, right? We also like to do this thing when we talk about technology projects, where it's binary. It's like black or white. It's a 1 or a 0. It's a have or you don't have. I think you can have a bit of a roadmap. You can say, look, we might not have the resources and the capital to do it today, but what is our technology roadmap over the next 18 months, the next 36 months? So if you're sitting watching this conversation and you don't have the capital to implement any technology into your business, that's also okay. But then maybe what you should do in your budgeting and your planning for the next 36-month forecast is to start thinking about what technology you would like to implement at which point and for what price point, right? I always say to entrepreneurs, technology is a never-ending game.
Yes.
There were certain technologies we were using 5 years ago that when we started using them, they were frontier. Today, all my competitors use them. And so it's a never-ending pursuit. The horizon of technology is non-existent. You're constantly chasing it.
Yes.
So build your operation, build your business, but have some sort of roadmap for how you're going to be implementing technologies as you go.
Obviously, that is extremely good advice. We've got around 2 minutes left. I want to end off. You are also involved and you are a keynote speaker at the Africa Agri-Tech Conference taking place from 14th to 16th of March. Now, just to give me a bit of a teaser, and our viewers also a teaser, what can they expect from your keynote address?
I'm very excited about this keynote, I must tell you. In the keynote, I'm going to be discussing fundamentally 3 things. First, what I think is South Africa's most unutilized or underutilized currency today, hope.
Oh, there we go.
And I'm going to talk about why hope is important.
Yes.
Why is hope important? Second, I'm going to talk a little bit about the shifts and change changes we're seeing in the world today and how those are impacting not only South Africa, but the agricultural sector. And then third, I'm going to talk high level about some of the frontier technologies we're seeing in the world and how operators need to start thinking about their interactions with those technologies.
That is unbelievable. Vusi, I'm definitely going to be in the audience. Thank you for your hope that you're bringing. I think that's such an important part of bringing a message across. And thanks for just bringing it to us. We will see you at the conference. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Ek kan ook nie wag nie. Dit was Vusi Thembekwayo en dis 'n naam wat ek nie hoef te verduidelik nie. 'n waagkapitalis. Nou hy gaan ook by die Africa Agri-Tech konferensie wees. Kry jou kaartjies. Ek is ook daar.